Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 3 to 5 English lesson on adjectives. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English language arts. We're doing grade 3 to 5. And then we're going to scroll down up until we get to our chapter of adjectives. All right. So our chapter is adjectives. Our subject is English language arts. We're doing grade 3 to 5. And the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of adjectives. All right. So when it comes to adjectives, right? An adjective is a word that tells you about a noun. Another word that we can use or words that we can use to describe an adjective. It's a doing word. It describes a noun. It describes a noun. It tells us about the noun. It modifies a noun, sorry. So that is an adjective. All right. So we said an adjective is a word that tells you about the noun, or we can say it describes the noun, or we can say it modifies the noun, right? But it tells us about the noun. Remember, a noun, it is basically words like names of people, places, animals, or things. Those are nouns. So an adjective, it describes that noun. right. And now, when it comes to adjectives, we said once again, an adjective is a word that tells you about a noun. And we said nouns, it names people, places, animals, or things. And an adjective, right? It answers questions like what kind? It's like say, what kind of thing is this? And how many? Those are the questions that they answer. What kind of dress? Yes. So an adjective is a word that tells you about a noun. It describes a noun. So we basically say that it tells us about the noun, or we can describe a noun, and that is why I also said, or we can say it modifies the noun. So we can either say describe, or it tells us, or modifies the noun, but that is an adjective. That is why if we have a word, right? If we have a noun, and our noun is, for example, we're talking about the dress, right? So within the adjective, it describes the dress. So we can either say beautiful dress, or we can say the red dress, or we can say whatever color dress, right? And now with an adjective, so red is the adjective that tells us about the dress or describes the dress, or it modifies that noun, which is dress. And with, for example, us saying red dress, now that is basically answering the question: what kind of dress is wearing? Is wearing a red dress. All right. So, like we said, when it comes to adjective, some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves is what kind? Because what kind is like saying, describing as, let's say, for example, we say it's a red dress. Then now the question is, what kind of red dress? Or the red dress, yes. But now, what kind of red dress? That is the question that we need to ask ourselves. Or if we, for example, have, let's say, girl is our noun, and now we say two girls. Now the question is, how many girls? Because remember, we said that our adjective, it either asks questions like what kind or how many. What kind of dress? How many girls? All right. So now we're going to look at an example of adjectives that either tells us what kind or tells us how many. All right. So we said that dress, for example, is our noun. What is our adjective? If you were to describe a dress, how would you describe a dress? Other than red, how would you describe the dress? If we were to, for example, somebody were to say, like, okay, here is the a noun given, you need to use words to describe. All right. Two girls, it shows how many. Can be two girls, one girl, five girls. That shows how many. Yes, shows what kind. All right. Can you think of another noun as well as words to describe the noun? Can you think of another noun and words to describe the noun? All right. So we see that we our adjectives, it tells us what kind and it tells us how many. And our examples, right? We already made an example, but another example is the small baby smiled. The small baby smiled. And if we were to choose the correct option, what kind of baby? You see, you need to now ask yourself questions like what kind of baby, how many babies, or so on. And yeah, they're not telling us how many of anything, so we're just gonna say the small baby. Because that sentence could have just said the baby smile. But now we're saying the small baby smile, which means that we are describing. All right. The next one says she carried heavy books. She carried heavy books. What is our adjective within that sentence? She carried heavy books. We need to select the adjective within that sentence. All right. And it says she carried heavy books, which means that heavy is our adjectives. Because what kind of books did she carry? She carried heavy books. So heavy is that word that tells us about our noun. And then we have adjectives that tells us how many are there of something. The first one says one baby smiled, so which means that one baby, how many? One. And the second one says she carried some books. And we can say she carried some books. Some books. Right? So once again, before we even go to A plus students.ca, we said adjectives are a word that describes the noun or tells us about the noun, or we can say it modifies the noun, right? But it tells us about the noun. And we can usually ask ourselves what kind, questions like what kind, or we can ask questions like how many. All right, so now we're going to A plus students.ca. All right. So now we're going to A plus students.ca. And we're now going to say, does the adjective tell you what kind or does it tell you how many? So we need to say, does the adjective tell us what kind or how many? All right. And we already went over what an adjective is, describes the noun, tells us about the noun, modifies the noun. And there are questions that is being asked when it comes to adjective. Questions like what kind of it is, or how many are there of All right. So we're going to look at, yeah, it says, smell as in smell, the scent, the fragrance. She smells the yellow rose. The word yellow that is in bold, does this tell us what kind or does it tell us how many? All right. So if we look at that sentences, she smells the yellow rose. Yellow, does that tell us what kind or does it tell us how many? Yellow rose. All right. The next one says, I've been there 4 times. 4 times. Does that tell us what kind or does it tell us how many? 4 times. Does that tell us what kind or how many? All right. So we see that when it comes to I've been there 4 times, then 4 times, 4 times tells us how many times. Yes, well done. How many? Well done. How many? And the last one, it says Cindy is a pretty girl. So pretty describes Cindy. Does it tell us what kind or does it tell us how many? Pretty. What kind or how many? So pretty girl, if we were to look at that word, pretty, does it tell us what kind or does it tell us how many? Pretty girl. Yes, well done. And pretty girl tells us what kind of girl it is. It is a pretty girl. All right. Now we're going on to our test where we need to say, does the adjective tell us about what kind or does it tell us about how many? All right. So follow these 5 rules. What kind or how many? How many rules? How many rules must you follow? And then yes, we're going to say it's option 2 because it tells us how many rules you need to follow. So well done. Option 2 is correct. One sock is missing. One sock is missing. Is it option one? What kind? Or option two? How many? So one sock is missing. Does it tell us how many socks is missing? What kind of socks is missing? All right. And yes, one sock, they tell us how many socks. So well done. One sock. It tells us how many socks. Colton spent $5. $5. Does that tell us what kind he did or how many he spent? $5. We need to say if it's what kind or if we need to say is it how many. All right. If it is Colton spent $5, then we can say it is telling us how many he spent. Yes, well done. So option two is correct because five is a number dollars. The park has three slides. The park has three slides. Does this tell us what kind of park it is or how many parks there are? All right, so the park has three slides. So now, are we saying what kind it is, or do we say how many there are? Option one or option two? All right, and then we can say the park has three slides. So that is how many slides does the park have? Well done. Well done. Now we're going on to identifying the adjectives that describes the noun, that tells us about the noun, that modifies the noun. I will buy 6 tickets. I will buy 6 tickets. You need to select the adjective that tells us how many tickets. Just write down the adjective that tells us how many. All right. And if we were to select the adjective that tells us how many, then yes, we will say six tells us how many tickets they bought, or I will buy, they will buy. The next one says Harry read five books. Harry read five books. Does that tell us what kind, or does it tell us how many? And what tells us how many within that sentence? All right. So now we're going on to our test where we are going to identify the adjective that describes the noun, whether it is an adjective that tells us what kind, or if it's an adjective that tells us how many. But we are going to identify the adjective that describes or modifies or tells us about the noun. All right, so now it says, look at the beautiful butterfly. Look at the beautiful butterfly. We need to select the adjective that tells us what kind of butterfly. Is it option one, at, or option two, beautiful? So option one, at, or option two, beautiful. And if we were to select the adjective that tells us what kind, then we would say it's option two, beautiful. Yes, well done. Well done. Beautiful is correct. The next one says Mitchell has a red belt. All right. It says Mitchell has a red belt. And if we were to choose the correct option, then yes, we will choose option two because it tells us what kind of belt he has. And that is a red belt. All right. The next one says Emma sang a pretty song. Emma sang a pretty song. What kind of song did Emma sing? Was it sang option one or pretty option two? Emma sang a pretty song. All right, and we will say Emma sang a pretty song. And if we were to choose the correct one, then yes, we will say pretty describes the song. So well done. Yes, option two is correct. All right. And we said that was a wonderful play. We need to say what kind it is. Is it wonderful or is it play? Which one is correct? All right. We said that that was a wonderful play. Is wonderful option one our adjective or play our adjective? All right. And if we were to choose our adjective, right, then we would choose option one, yes, because it will tell us what kind of play, right? It is a wonderful play. So well done. All right, let's do the last one. And the last one says Dalton did a silly dance. Dalton did a silly dance. All right. And Dalton did a silly dance. We need to say what kind it is. Then, yes, we will go with option one. What kind of dance? It is a silly dance. And now we need to say the woman completed three puzzles. The woman completed three puzzles. All right. And if we were to choose the correct option, it says the woman completed three puzzles. How many puzzles did the woman complete? Three. So three tells us how many puzzles or how many something the person completed. All right. So this is now the end of our lesson on adjectives. We said adjectives is words that describes the noun. Or adjectives are words that basically modifies the noun. Or we can just say that adjectives is, let me say, a describing word. Tells us about the noun, right? That is an adjective. All right. So this is the end of our lesson. We said even with adjectives, some adjectives tells us what kind, some tell us how many. But an adjective describes a noun, tells us about the noun, or modifies a noun. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on adjectives. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining the class, and I really hope that you are going to have a good evening further. All right, so till next time, I'll see you guys, I think, tomorrow. Goodbye. Thank you.